torture fascinates millions of people. Torture has been a hobby of man since we first had helpless captives in our complete control. People have spent long hours imagining and creating ways to inflict horrific pain upon their fellow creatures, especially men and women. People have been doing this to each other since the discovery of fire. I speak, of course, about burning at the stake. This is the second entry in my torture series. Number 1 was scaphism, or the boats. Burning people tied to a stake became exceptionally popular during the Spanish Inquisition and the witch hunts of the Dark Ages. But most historians will agree that the urge to burn one fellow's man and to hear their screams of horror and pain was done for a lot of reasons, not specifically religiously oriented. Burning people at the stake was seen as great entertainment. We're talking about the first Monday Night Football. We're talking about Battle of the Network Stars. We're talking about MTV, X's on the Beach nonsense and all of that. A good burning at the stake would guarantee a small village or city would see full attendance from everybody in the area who would come around to watch the festivities. They would even buy souvenirs from vendors who would sell little dioramas of the scene and dolls of the victims or the accused, so that the children could replay the scene over and over and over again in the privacy of their parents' hovel, shack, servant shed, rectory, or Sunday school. What fun! If you didn't have money to spend on a doll or a diorama for your children, there were a variety of treats to be had. Roasted meat on a stick, don't ask where it came from, candies of all sorts, fried bread filled with a variety of jams and jellies and sweetmeats, the omnipresent jerky. Once again, don't ask what animal it's made from. Admission of guilt was very important. Admission of guilt guaranteed mercy in the eyes of God and the clergy. This mercy did not extend very far, because admit your guilt or not, you would still be going to that stake. Only you would be mercifully strangled to death first or given a poison, so that you would miss the fun of having the flames lick away your flesh. Those who did not admit to their crimes were denied the mercy of the clergy. They were denied the mercy of God. Their soul would be forever tormented. But first, they'd be marched to that stake to be burnt alive. Only the proudest did not admit their guilt. And when they went to the stake and burned, it was not uncommon to hear them scream all manner of obscenities and accusations at their accusers and the onlookers. This had a way of generating more witch trials in the future, and more festivities for the townsfolk who were lucky enough to not be among the accused. While the screams were quite enjoyable, the false accusations, the obscenities hurled at everybody in the audience, this had a damping effect on the festivities. Something had to be done. So the church developed methods to curb that behavior. That often meant the mutilation of the accused tongue. They would pierce it with nails, shred it with forks, cut it, slice it, and toast it between two hot metal plates that were often inscribed with a variety of Christian designs, such as the crucifix, the Madonna, and the face of Jesus. It is said these plates ended up in the Vatican, where today they are used to produce toast. But I haven't found anybody in the Vatican yet that would corroborate that story. The toasted tongue became a favorite method of silencing the heretics as they received their godly punishment. That was because a swollen tongue did not totally impede speech, but it made the person using such a tongue incapable of rendering coherent conversation. Everything the accused attempted to say with such a swollen tongue came out as if they were bumbling, feeble-minded idiots who could not command the English language. This served to further the goal of the church, as it indicated that those who were against the church were of feeble mind or incapable of standard human conversation, and therefore deserved punishment and eternal damnation. And the weirdly warbling, hooting, whistling screams produced by a person with such a swollen tongue were said to be very humorous and highly entertaining to the gathered crowd. Having a speech impediment in the Dark Ages was not a good thing. Anybody could be accused of heresy, blasphemy, or witchcraft, and find themselves in a courtroom surrounded by like-minded citizens. Let's take the case of Ezekiel Tarantla, for example. Ezekiel Tarantla's little daughter got sick, so he took her to town. The local physician could do nothing, so he took her to church, and the priest said, "Pray." So he prayed. The priest prayed. Everybody prayed for the wellness of the little child. But the kid died anyways, out to the cornfield. No biggie, because there were lots more where that one came from. And a few months later, another child of Ezekiel's grew sick. He took it to the local physician in town. After applying leeches and oils, the physician said he couldn't do anything, best take her to the priest. To the church they would go. They would pray over the child. The priest would anoint them with holy water, beseech God for mercy. Ezekiel would take the child home, and the child would die, out to the cornfield. A couple months would pass. Now Ezekiel's boy was sick. He took him to the physician. The physician looked him over, applied the leeches, applied the oils, then said, best send him to the church. The priest would anoint him with oil. They'd light incense. The gathered souls would pray for wellness. Ezekiel took the boy home. A few days later, he was in the cornfield. That's okay. Ezekiel's got another boy, who gets sick 2 months later. Now Ezekiel's not stupid. This time, he's figured out that this trip to town and going to the physician and then the priest, there's something wrong there. One of these people doesn't know what the heck they're doing. So Ezekiel bypasses the physician. He goes straight to the church. The priest says that's fine. The physician can't do anything for him anyways. Only God can cure the boy. So they pray. He anoints him with oil. He lights incense. They sing hymns. They send the boy home. A week later, he's in the cornfield. Time passes, and eventually, another one of Ezekiel's daughters takes ill. Yes, they had big families back then because women were considered to be primarily baby-making machines. My apology, ladies. That's a historical fact. So please, no hate mail. Now Ezekiel's not stupid. He knows that going to the church didn't do anything, so he decides just to go to the physician this time. The physician does the regular things, and this makes Ezekiel even more nervous because he's seen these regular things before and they never seem to work in the past, and he mentions this to the physician. Well, that wily old physician. He decides that maybe he should bust loose with some of his secret information. He tells Ezekiel about an old lady that lives in the woods, who's had success in cases where he was powerless. Oh, oh, Ezekiel brightens up right away. He finds the old lady in the woods. He obtains the cure, and he administers it to his daughter. His daughter is cured. He's so happy. But the happiness doesn't last long, because while Ezekiel was in town, somebody noticed his trip to the physician. They went and told the priest, of course, who was waiting for him to bring the sick child in so he could pray over it for God's mercy. The child never showed up. Ezekiel never showed up. A little investigation by the church discovers that Ezekiel went to the physician, and then he was seen going into the forest, alone. That could only mean one thing. He went to see that old lady with the herbs again. This was too much. In the priest's eyes, Ezekiel had just turned his back on God. In the priest's eyes, Ezekiel was now a sinner. So they round up Ezekiel and his family. They take them in for questioning. After a variety of tortures, they discover Ezekiel's sin was not taking his child to church to be prayed over. His second sin was going to the old lady in the woods. The third sin was using a concoction prepared, surely, by the devil himself. And not only was Ezekiel in trouble, but the surviving daughter was in trouble as well, for she imbibed that devilish concoction. So now they've discovered two sinners in their ranks. Since this episode is concentrating on the stake, I won't go into the varied methods and tools used by these torturers to get a confession from their charges. Let's just say they had a great time at what they did, and they liked their jobs. Especially when they had a tender young girl, all alone in the dark. Since God makes no mistakes, once sinners were in the clutches of the church, they rarely escaped. Eventually, dead or alive, they would find themselves tied to a stake on top of a pile of firewood in the center of town. And that was the fate of Ezekiel Tarantla and his daughter, Donna Tarantla. It didn't matter that he admitted everything and hid nothing. He had sinned in the eyes of the church. There could be only one redemption: purifying flames. Ezekiel went to the stake, alive and conscious. They euthanized the child using strangulation, the favorite method. People tied to the stake could last up to 2 hours if the wind and the conditions were right. But normally their screams ended around the half-hour mark, where pain and smoke inhalation became too much for the human organism to remain conscious. After the fire was out and the coals were cold, they would collect the charred remains to give them a proper Christian burial, or a heretic's grave, which was sometimes far from town, located at a crossroads, where, if the vengeful spirit returned, it would have a difficult time knowing which direction to go to seek its vengeance. I think of burning at the stake every time I make a nice sirloin or fire up my barbecue. I don't know what there is about it except for the thoughts of the horrific pain. I mean, we've all burned ourselves at one time or another. You know the throbbing agony of just a little finger that touched the hot end of a match. Imagine that in your entire body. Gruesome indeed. And that's all for today, folks. What did you think of today's production? Comment below. Subscribe to my channel. Click the bell. That way you'll be informed when a new production appears. I have a murder of crows that showed up outside on my deck. I don't know what omen that means, but I'm gonna go find out.